Hello, this is Fred Long, and I'm going to be doing some constituent marking on the end of James 5, 19, and 20. So I have the Greek text there, and it's got the text critical comments, little notation, sigla, and then down below I have the NASB translation. And I'm just going to mark it up here, talk about some things, what I'm seeing, and there are some interesting things for sure. So, Adelphi mu is vocative, and vocatives, when I do my constituent marking, I put inside of curly braces because it's a special use of the noun cases. So this is a vocative, direct address. The mu is kind of interesting because you don't usually have mu. You just have siblings or brethren. But my brethren is interesting. There is a textual variant where the mu is removed. So what does that add? It adds, the mu would be adding a little bit of a personal relationship. It would that's what it's marking, my brother. So the author Jacob, who we translate James, but it's really Jacob, is saying my siblings, my brothers. And then you have right away an if clause. And this is setting up a conditional clause. This is a conditional sentence. This is the protasis of a condition. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark up all the connectors, so I don't have to put a box around them. I'm going to put a green highlight. That's my marking box. All right, so now I can go back to the marking. If someone, tis, someone among you. So tis is an indefinite pronoun. It's being modified by the prepositional phrase, which I put in parentheses. And then, this is a case where, the en, whom min is... the prepositional phrase is modifying a pronoun or noun, right? Because a lot of times they modify verbs, but they can indeed modify nouns or pronouns. And here's a case where it's modifying a pronoun. If someone among you is deceived, this is subjunctive. It's an aorist passive subjunctive, third singular, away from the truth. If someone is deceived from the truth, so the apo here is indicating a separation, and we could translate that away from the truth. And then there's some textual variants there of the way of the truth. So one of the textual variants is from the way of the truth. So that's interesting. So if someone is deceived away from the truth, and someone returns him. All right, so that's the if part. So we have two indefinite pronouns. Someone deceived, someone turning him back. So epistrepho. And so this is an aorist subjunctive, third singular, epistrepho. Of tone there is the direct object. If someone turns him, let him know. So all that if part is setting up what's called the supposition. And with aeon, you typically expect the subjunctive, which we have. We have two subjunctive verbs. And so this is setting up either a future, more vivid conditional sentence or a present general conditional sentence, and the difference is going to be in the time frame of the main verb. And the time frame of the main verb is present imperative. It's a present time frame. So I think that's rather significant. And let's go to that verb there, genoskete, geto. So that's a third singular imperative form, present tense. Let him know. that. Let him know this. Now the OT here is setting off what follows as being particularly important. Let him know that, that's really the content. I should just back off and just say that's the content. That's the content. It's not a direct quote, so it's not setting it off in any special way, except it is just marking that this is the content. So this OT is the content of the knowing, and the content of the knowing is a substantive participle, the one having turned a sinner, from the error of his way. So there's a big prepositional phrase, ek planes odou avtu, from the error of his ways. Those are a bunch of genitives. So the error, which consists of his way. What kind of genitives are those? That'd be worth thinking about. The error, I think that of his way, I think that might be an appositional genitive. The error is his way. The error is his way that he's gone wrong in. Okay, so if someone having turned a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul. Will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. So I'm marking as I'm talking that through. So will save his soul. Presumably the him is referring back to the sinner, not the guy who saves him, presumably, from death. So saves his soul from death. So soul is the word psuche, right? It can mean life force, soul. It seems to construe the part of the human person that it can experience everlasting life. And whether that's going to be, life with God or life apart from God would be interesting. So that could be something to look at in relation to James, his soul. What kind of afterlife or eternity or whatever does James envision here? Will save his soul from death and will cover up a multitude of sins. So the word multitude here is a neuter singular accusative. It's a third declension noun, so the ending there looks different than what we're used to. And this verb kalupto is covers up. And this is kind of a weird idiom, right? Because is that a good thing to cover up sins? What does it mean to cover up sins? This is echoing Old Testament scriptures, and that's obviously going to be important to interpret the passage and what it means is what is entailed in covering up sins. Because when I hear that, I don't really know what that means. I think it's a good thing, but is covering up mean to hide them so that they're not in public scrutiny? Does it mean that is this like an honor shame kind of thing? Is it does it cover mean prevents a multitude of sins? And so another question I would have is what multitude are we talking about? Like sin begetting sin begetting sin? Okay, there's something about that rings true. When I think about King David, for example, and his sin with Bathsheba, actually there's several sins there. And perhaps the first one was his initial complacency not to go out to battle like the rest of the kings did. That's how the story is framed. So there is David abdicating his responsibility, and now he's looking upon the nakedness of another man's wife, which, he should have stopped there. That's a sin. So then he goes further, violates that relationship. Then he has her husband killed. Then he lies about it. So you have a multitude of sin because of an initial sin wasn't dealt with. So I don't know. I'm just wondering out loud what is meant by a multitude of sins. And what do commentators say about that? I don't know. I'm very interested in sin these days. So, I guess I've got a lifetime of doing it and struggling against it and being sanctified. And I just recognize that I don't know that we have a good grasp of what's involved in it. We kind of walk around it in ways and don't really address it. So, going back to the condition, one last thought. What kind of condition is it? Go to Koine Greek Grammar, chapter 26. Get aeon with the subjunctive, followed by a present time frame verb. Let him know. This would be a present general truth condition. In other words, what this seems to be conveying is that this is true no matter when it happens. And what this does is it makes this conditional statement have more of a continual application potential. Like it's powerful. Like this is always a valuable thing. This is always a valuable thing to do this. If you see someone in the error of his ways, someone who has been deceived from the truth, and of course, what is the truth there? What kind of degree of level of truth are we talking about? I've been on Facebook and I'm being called out for stuff. I'm calling people out on stuff, because I don't feel they're being truthful. There's just a failure of logic. And these are brothers, former students, friends that are making statements, and it's kind of mind-boggling. So, are we talking that level of, people being deceived? If this is the case, then, we better get off Facebook, because we're going to be seeing a lot of stuff that we're going to be constantly fighting against because of the deception that's going on. And you have to be careful of our own arrogance and all this kind of stuff, blah, 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 which is very true. But this does seem to be at an individual level, someone among you, so kind of a one person. And it doesn't really talk about the process of how you would go about turning that sinner. And of course, that's all important. Like, how do you turn? How do you turn somebody? It's almost like The Walking Dead, like people getting turned. You're trying to turn somebody and you get turned because you get bit. And I think that can very easily happen, like if we're not prepared. And this kind of warning, of turning and being careful is really sounded very firmly at the end of Jude, which would be another thing to look at, another passage to think about, like the early Christian community as a truth-bearing, truth-committed, holy community that confronts its members lovingly who are in error. Like this is a theme that's found in many of Paul's letters as well. So I don't know. I don't see that the church is doing this a lot. Maybe with little picadillos, maybe on Facebook, maybe. But I'm just curious about this verse. And just one last thought, that as I read through the latter New Testament, the last part of it, I'm always struck at how firmly John's, 1 John, Hebrews, Peter, Jude, James, how harsh they are, like hard and firm they are in dealing with sin. It always stunned me. It always stands out that there's a concern for it. And so, these verses definitely are concerned about it and laying out this benefit, that this is a great thing to do. Well, I hope you found that helpful, and see you next time.